We return once more to reading one story from Pu Songling's Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio every day until I get bored or forget. Today we have story number 5, Talking Pupils. In the city of Chang'an there lived a man by the name of Feng Dung, known as a gentleman of considerable accomplishments, while at the same time having a reputation as an unprincipled libertine. If ever a pretty woman caught his eye on the street, he would trail her and do his utmost to seduce her. The day before the Qingming festival, he happened to be out strolling in the countryside when he saw a small carriage pass by, with red curtains and embroidered blinds. It was followed by a train of servants and horses, including one particular maid on a pony, who struck Feng as being very good-looking. He went closer to get a better view of the girl on the pony, and, as he did so, noticed through the slightly parted curtains of the carriage a young lady, about 16 years old, gorgeously attired and of a beauty such as he had never witnessed in his life. He gazed at her dumbfounded, rooted to the spot, and then proceeded to keep up with the carriage for several miles, now walking slightly ahead, now trailing behind. Finally he heard the young lady command her maid to come to the side of her carriage. "Let down the blinds, girl. Who does that wild young man think he is, the one who keeps ogling me in that insolent fashion?" The maid let down the blinds and spoke angrily to Feng. "My lady is the bride of the 7th young lord of Hibiscus Town, and she's on her way to visit her parents. She is no village lass for the likes of you to gawp at." So saying, she took a pinch of dust from the ground by the carriage wheel and threw it in his face. Feng was momentarily blinded and could not even open his eyes. He rubbed them, and when finally he did succeed in opening them, carriage and horses, young lady and maid, had all vanished into thin air. He returned home in great perplexity of spirit, all the time aware of a continuing discomfort in his eyes. He asked a friend to lift up his eyelids and take a look inside, and the friend told him that there was a clearly visible film over each of his eyeballs. The next morning the condition was still more pronounced, and there was an unstoppable flow of tears from each eye. The film continued to thicken, and after a few days it was as thick as a copper coin. In addition, a spiral-shaped protuberance began growing from the right eye, which resisted any treatment. Feng was now totally blind, and his condition filled him with despair and remorse. Hearing that a Buddhist scripture, known as the Sutra of Light, had the power to cure ailments such as his, he acquired a copy and found a person to teach it to him so that he could recite it by heart. For a certain period of time, his physical discomfort and mental perplexity continued unabated, but after a while he began to find a certain peace of mind. Morning and evening he sat cross-legged chanting the sutra and counting the beads of his rosary, and after a year of this he eventually succeeding in attaining a state of genuine detachment and serenity. Then one day, out of the blue, he heard a voice, quiet as a fly, coming from within his left eye. This is what it said: "It's pitch black in here, unbearable." From his right eye came the reply: "Why don't we go out for a little stroll? It might help us shake off this gloom." Then he felt a slight irritation in both nostrils, as if 2 little creatures were wriggling down his nose. After a while he felt the creatures return and make their way back up his nostrils and into his eye sockets again. "I hadn't seen the garden for ages," said one voice. "Aren't the pearl orchids looking withered?" Now Feng had always been especially fond of the orchids, and cultivated several varieties in his garden, which he had been in the habit of watering himself every day. But ever since losing his sight, he had lost all interest in them and had completely neglected them. Hearing this exchange, he promptly asked his wife why his orchids had been allowed to wither away. She, in turn, asked him how he even knew this to be the case, since he was blind, whereupon he told her about his strange experience. She went out into the garden, and sure enough, the flowers were quite dead. Greatly intrigued by what her husband had told her, she decided to hide herself in his room and keep watch. It was not long before she saw 2 little mannikins, neither of them any larger than a bean, emerge from his nose and fly buzzing out of the door. They were soon well out of sight, but were back again in next to no time, flying together up onto his face and in at his nostrils, like a pair of homing bees or ants. They did the same thing 2 or 3 days running. Then Feng heard a voice speak from within his left eye. "That tunnel is a dreadfully roundabout way of going in and out, most inconvenient. We really should think of making ourselves a proper doorway." "The wall on my side is very thick," replied the right eye. "It won't be easy." "I'll try to make an opening on my side," said the left eye. "Then we can share my door." Presently Feng thought he felt a scratching and a splitting in his left eye socket, and an instant later he could see. He could see everything around him with absolute clarity. Beside himself with delight, he promptly informed his wife. who inspected his eyes afresh and found that in the left eye a minute aperture had appeared in the film, a hole no larger than a cracked peppercorn, through which gleamed the black globe of a pupil. By the next morning, the film in the left eye had disappeared altogether. But the strangest thing of all was that on careful inspection there were now 2 pupils visible in that eye, while the right eye was still obscured by its spiral-shaped growth. Apparently, both of the 2 eye mannequins, his talking pupils, had now taken up residence in the left eye. So although Fong was still blind in one eye, he could see better with his one good eye than he had ever done with 2. From that day forth, he was a great deal more circumspect in his behavior, and acquired an impeccable reputation in the district.